everybody. This is another short stack tabletop lecture. My name is Greg, and today I will be discussing caster roles, primary spellcasting class roles. And for purposes of this video, that means any class with spell slot progression running all the way up to 9th level. So wizards, sorcerers, clerics, druids, and bards. So Magic in 5th edition isn't what it was in previous editions. Magicians don't have as many spell slots as they used to, and the selection of spells is much more limited. And this is part of a policy enacted by the designers to prevent it from dominating mid to high level play. And whether or not they succeeded is beyond the scope of this video. What matters is that Magic suddenly has become a very limited resource, and when a resource is limited, you need to be very careful in how you use it, especially in the case of classes that I just mentioned. And once these classes are out of spell slots, they're basically impotent, right? You could make the argument that cantrips sort of mitigate that, or maybe, make it a little less of a problem. And perhaps that's true to an extent, but the power of cantrips was also very limited to avoid overshadowing the skills and abilities of other classes. And what we're left with are classes that can't afford to toss around spells like candy. These new casters have to conserve their magic, and then only use it when doing that will accomplish the most good. But it's not always clear what that looks like, and what does the most good actually mean, right? So here's the simple answer. Spells are tools used to solve problems. The average adventuring party has a whole bunch of tools at its disposal. They have weapons, they have spells, they have special abilities, they have skills, they have magical items. So the job of a primary casting class is to do things that no other member of the party can do better. But I mean, what things are we talking about that need doing, right? According to the rules, the three pillars of a good D&D experience are supposed to be exploration, social interaction, and combat. So it stands to reason that spells should help you do these three things. But let's take a look at the three pillars and figure out how that actually holds up. Pillar number 1, exploration. Uh, Information gathering spells are super useful. I'll say that. A few divinations and like an arcane eye spell or two can let your party map out an entire dungeon without even having to go inside. And spells that change your environment or mitigate, danger are also good for exploration. You got things like Stone Shape, Pass Wall, Tiny Hut, Rock to Mud, Dispel Magic. But most travel spells are actually awful for exploration because they bring along fewer people than are actually found in an adventuring party. For the purposes of party movement, these are of very limited usefulness, especially because they all focus on transporting the caster somewhere else, and a physically vulnerable person should probably not be eager to move away from the protection of their comrades. So Spider Climb, Dimension Door, Fly, Misty Step. The purpose of these spells in practice is basically espionage or getting you out of trouble, not exploring, unless you're doing the lone wolf thing and splitting the party, which is frowned on because then the only person who gets to participate is you. So on the subject of using magic for exploration, my advice is read up on divination and utility spells and make very judicious use of them. Think about how they're actually going to be used in practice, whether not just falling into the trap of, ooh, that sounds cool, right? You need to think about the group. And the second pillar is social interaction. And this one, I'm just going to come out and say it. Most spells that influence social interaction are enchantments that mess with a target's mind. Friends, charm person, suggestion, Gaius. Messing with a person's mind is a social taboo. I mean, it's invasive, it's violating, and good aligned characters can only safely do it under very specific circumstances without it being an ethos violation. And if you add to that the fact that most people who discover they were magically influenced tend to get violent, you have this awkward situation where you only want to use that sort of magic on targets when the consequences for failure or discovery aren't that bad. But if you need to waste a spell slot on that, it's usually something that's fairly important, right? You don't want to throw a suggestion spell at the queen because, what if people realize you just cast suggestion on the queen? That's not going to go so good. So, I mean, you could use enhance ability to give some guy advantage on charisma checks. That's a good one. But generally speaking, most social interactions of a non-hostile variety are going to be handled by talking and having high charisma characters roll ability checks for persuade, deception, intimidate. That's what they're for. That's why they took those skills. And for most characters who have those skills, it's a significant part of their class. So you don't want to take that from them. I mean, the tongue spell will help you breach the language barrier, but very little social interaction is actually handled with magic. Which brings us to the third pillar, which is combat. Adventuring normally involves a lot of fighting and looting and that sort of thing. And most of the other classes are probably kicking ass, since that's what they're built to do. And the metric that everyone at the table uses to have a good time is how much damage they deal. So it's only natural for casters to feel like on their turn of the initiative they should be chipping in. But here, something goes very wrong. The thugs don't run out of magic, and by wasting their spells trying to be cool and deal damage, the casters end up not having the spell slots they need for problems that can't be solved by dealing damage. And this leads me to my final piece of advice to players with these characters, which is don't compete with the thugs. Thugging bad guys is what thugs do, and unless you need to settle down a mob of orcs with a fireball, your precious combat magic is going to be much better spent disabling enemies or enhancing and protecting your allies. Unless your party is majorly lacking in the damage department. So spells like Minute Meteors, Blight, Witch Bolt, Scorching Ray, Lightning Bolt, and things like that, they're basically just traps that play on the ego. Spells like Invisibility or Hypnotic Pattern or Haste, Major Image, Arcane Eye, Counterspell, Confusion, Polymorph, Wall of Fire, those will serve you far better in the long run because they do things that nobody else in the group can already do. So here we have some recommended do's and don'ts for primary caster classes, but all of the do's come with a very important caveat, which is that they only work well when your party knows that you can do them and they have the discipline to fold these spells into their action plan. And that means talking about it ahead of time. A caster who doesn't tell people what spells they have prepared or runs around tossing out spells while everyone else on the team is charging around egocentrically declaring different actions isn't going to deliver much value to the group. And a group of players who don't stop to utilize the caster's spells and rely on them aren't going to get any value at all. So successfully playing a primary caster practically demands that everybody at the table is channeling their inner A-team. And this is notoriously hard for young, aggressive, argumentative players to do. But we all have to start somewhere, and having a clear view of these issues can let groups that still need to acclimate to this stuff do so more gracefully. That's all for now. Thank you for watching and listening. I'm going to be wrapping things up here. If you like this video, please remember to click like and subscribe. And if you have any comments, feel free to add them below. I would love to read them. Take care.